Hey everyone, you're tuning into the GTM Pack podcast. I'm your host, Justin Dorfman, and today we're joined by Tom Bruining, the co-founder of HowdyGo. How's it going, Tom?
Yeah, it's going well, going well.
And by the way, I want to make sure I pronounce your last name correctly. Is that
Yeah,
is
that's
that
right.
okay? Good.
Yeah,
I
nailed
thought
it.
it was probably the right one, but I always want to make sure that I'm not messing up with somebody's pronunciation. But really
Yeah,
appreciate.
Dutch surname, Australian. I don't know how to pronounce it, so
Awesome. Well, we'll go with that for now. But really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. I'm super excited to chat for two main reasons. One, I'm a big fan of the interactive demo space, so I'd love to get your perspective on how to go and interactive demos. But you're also a early stage bootstrapped founder, which is an obsession of mine, and I'm really excited to pick your brain on your journey and your experience so far.
yeah, sounds good.
But to start, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to found HowdyGo?
Yeah, so originally I started my career in data and analytics at one of the big four consulting firms. Decided to kind of like throw in and roll the dice on my career and move over to London to join a startup based in London. They're a digital textbook aggregator called Bibliu. When I left, I think there are about 20 million ARR. We basically, I think I joined at employee number 11 as like I don't know, head of growth and marketing, but in an 11-person startup, you just end up doing whatever kind of comes across your plate. So it was pretty tactical, I guess. I spent maybe 6 or 7 months as one of their lead engineers, and then sort of started to pick up the reins on the growth and marketing activities a lot more. And my two co-founders at HowdyGo, they joined me from Bibliu. So one was the co-founder and CTO, the other was VP of product. And I'd sort of moved to HelloFresh as their head of data and BI for a year and a half. It was a pretty intense time because they'd just come out of their massive growth spurt off the back of COVID. So we were really trying to kind of get operations into a more comfortable place. So that meant that I was having to sort of straddle the boundaries between operational and helping the sort of that side of the business to kind of get boxes out the door. We were feeding hundreds of thousands of people every week, so it was pretty intense. So I was kind of working with the operations team, but then also getting to work really closely with the marketing and growth function to kind of manage the volume of customers that we were getting on a weekly basis so that we could make sure we were hitting service levels. So it was a really interesting time. We kind of all reached a point in our careers where we were like, okay, cool. It's a good opportunity to kind of maybe try something here. And my two co-founders and I, we'd all worked together before and we loved it. So it's kind of like starting a business with your friends, which is always nice. And fortunately it stayed that way, that we're not at each other's throats. Yeah, we decided to take the plunge and sort of build a new SaaS product together. And that was a little over a year ago. Yeah.
Very cool. Awesome. And I know I mentioned the interactive product demos, so I've kind of given a hint to what HowdyGo does. But for those that aren't familiar, maybe you can tell us a little bit about HowdyGo and also a little bit of an intro to interactive product demos, what they are, how people are using them.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, as you said, HowdyGo, we're an interactive product demo tool. We basically help SaaS companies to demonstrate their products by allowing them to share and embed interactive walkthroughs of their product. So the most obvious use case is the one that you often see on sort of the cutting edge SaaS products that are out there at the moment, where they've replaced their walkthrough videos with a walkthrough interactive product demo. And it just gives you a much more realistic experience of the product before they've had to sign up. Usually these things are ungated, but that's kind of optional. You can take lead information if you want to off the at the beginning, and it really kind of gives people an insight into what the value proposition of the product is, because you're using the product to basically explain what it does, while you're also providing additional context around the value proposition as they click through it. They can scroll around in the demos. They can kind of like interact with things in a fairly guided way. It's sort of like being on guardrails as you go through this product. So I think that's the sort of main use case, but there's a few other use cases, particularly when you start to look at like product marketing and feature adoption. And maybe we'll chat through some of those in due course during this episode. So that's awesome. Kind of the high level of HowdyGo.
Really, really interesting to sort of get the overview. And I'm curious though, like your background, you mentioned the companies that you worked at. This seems to be a little bit of a different space, right? Than you've worked in the past. How did you decide that this is the type of product that you wanted to build? What was the insight that made you feel, obviously when you make a decision to dive into something like this, you have to be prepared to work on something for a decade or more, right? So it has to be something you're passionate and interested in. I'm curious, what was the insight that was like, this is what we want to solve. This is what we want to build.
Yeah. So, I mean, a bit of a funny story back to our origins. We started with like a list of ideas. And I think like the Twilio founder had a similar kind of approach to it, like list of all the ideas, matrix of like, okay, like, is this a good idea for this reason? Does it have a good TAM? Does it have, the right kind of market? Is there a community that we can find? One of them was like, can it be used for evil? And we basically just like started ruling out potential ideas. And the first one we tried out was actually this dentistry tool to help with dentists referring their patients. Anyway, like none of us are dentists. So when you say that this is like a completely different space, I can tell you dentistry is a completely different space. And that was a real, that was a bit of a learning curve. We only spent maybe a month on that one and we're like, this is not a good idea. But what we kind of, the core insight, I suppose, that kind of brought us to interactive product demos as an idea is that when we were all working at Bibliu, it's a really interesting product space because it's effectively a marketplace problem, right? So you have students who are your like core consumers, but they're not the ones that are paying for it because we're selling business to business, university level deals. They're signing off on basically providing their entire student cohort with digital textbooks. So you have to keep your students happy, but they're sort of like, that's the baseline. And then you have the universities who are selecting all of the content and the publishers who own the rights to it. So you have to basically get this like giant list of all the textbooks that they could possibly want, and then figure out a way that you can convince the publishers to come on board and provide the content. The challenge there is that you need to have some kind of like value add. So the value add that we identified was that we could basically do usage analytics in a way that was really, really interesting, because we were tracking literally every action that the students were taking, which led to two things. One is that we were able to provide a pretty good summary view of whether the student cohort was getting the return on investment that the universities were looking for. If they're paying for these books, they want them to be used. They want them to be used extensively, and they want to understand which subjects, for instance, are using them more than others so that they can adjust the following year. And publishers are looking to understand how they can improve their content, and they're looking for new ways to basically sell their books. And one of the kind of core business models that we happened upon was this idea of selling based on content consumption. So how much are you using, and then charging universities based on that, and they would draw down on the balance. That's a long-winded way to get to the point that the analytics was a really centralized part of what we were selling. And it was incredibly difficult to demonstrate because we would have to create essentially a data analytics engine that is producing realistic but engaging analytics data to fill our demonstration environment. And we did that, and it was really expensive. We spent like a ridiculous amount of time, engineering time, trying to get a great looking dashboard that we could present to universities to convince them that they should sign on with us, and also publishers to convince them that we knew what we were doing and that they should sign on to this new business model. And that kind of insight is that, we felt that we could solve that by basically producing something that gives you the feel of the analytics experience, but without needing the massive engineering effort in the background to make it happen. And I think that when you really get down to the core of what interactive product demos do, it's empowering marketing and go-to-market teams to basically independently demonstrate their platforms consistently and create that marketing engine off the back of the product.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you kind of mentioned this previously. And actually it's an area that seems to be quite similar to your last space, but I think with product marketing, interactive product demo products, there are a number of different types of users, right? So you mentioned product marketing earlier. You were mentioning your last company where there are also various different stakeholders. So I'm curious, in this space, in the interactive demo space, who are the stakeholders? Who are the various players or people that are using the product? And what are the different use cases? Again, you mentioned product marketing and some of the ways they're using it. You just mentioned analytics. I'm curious, who are the main users and what are the various use cases that they use the product for?
Yeah. So, look, marketers of all varieties, but if you look at the sort of top of funnel, that's the essential use case where it's embedded content in their landing page, maybe a little bit below the fold after you've given some high level overview of what the product does. And then the kind of the next phase of that is the product marketing teams, who are basically looking to coordinate their product releases. It gives a really engaging way that you can share changes to the product in a way that you can kind of talk them through it, but also just give them an opportunity to click through it. So the product release side, there's also the kind of element of product feature adoption. And I think that's a really valuable one, because so many products these days are that sort of freemium and add-on experience where you've got a user in the platform, but they're maybe half considering signing up to some component that is behind a paywall. Interactive product demos give you a way that you can basically capture that flow and capture that experience and just link straight out of it. Boom, they can drop straight into a zero friction demo environment and understand what feature they will be unlocking. And we've seen people use that in a B2C context as well, really effectively. And I think that kind of element is maybe the sort of latter stage implementation, but it really helps people to kind of visualize what they're going to pay for in a way that, app queues or the in-app prompts can't really do, because the thing that interactive product demos bring to the forefront is the ability to demonstrate your app at its best. Right? Filled with data, filled with everything that you kind of want to show people, and do it in a way that is really, really fast and easy to get out the door. And that's why analytics is a great use case for it, right? Because analytics, the only way to demonstrate a dashboard in a way that is engaging is to do it with a story. So let's say, for instance, you've got an email security tool, and you really want to show how your AI system flags emails automatically for review by the security team. You can do that with an interactive product demo, but doing that on an ongoing basis with a data analytics engine in the background is really difficult. So those are the sort of core use cases. You can use it across marketing from a top of funnel perspective. You can use it in your marketing, in your product marketing area. And you can also use all of this content in a way that kind of gives sales teams an opportunity to share it into their potential prospects and help to move deals along and unlock opportunities by basically, empowering internal prospect champions to understand what the product does and share it with their team and colleagues, and also buying committees who might not have time to join a call for 30 minutes and go through a full demo flow. You could just be like, boom, here's a zero friction opportunity to see what the product does and kind of get their tick of approval.
Yeah, makes total sense. And I think it's like the space has really exploded over the last couple of years. Like I remember, I don't know whether it was 2-3 years ago when I first started to see them interactive product demos sort of pop up. And as you said, now you go to most SaaS sites, SaaS products, and there's, an interactive product demo instead of a demo video. But I saw a really interesting post on your guys' blog. Maybe you posted a couple of weeks ago about these different categories of interactive product demo products, right? Mm-hmm. I think maybe you said in the article there's 2 or 3 different categories of interactive product demos. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. How do you categorize these products? And if I'm somebody thinking about purchasing an interactive product demo solution for the first time, how do I think about which one's right for me, which category?
Yeah. So we sort of view it as 3 different categories, and I think that most of the market is starting to kind of form around those 3 different categories pretty clearly. Like Gartner, for instance, if you look at their research, they separate it into these 3 distinct categories as well. The first one, I'll run you through the ones that HowdyGo isn't in, and then I'll go through the last one. So the first one is screenshot demos, and screenshot demos are, I like to think of them as sort of like slideshows. They sort of give a feeling of interactivity, but the reality is that you're not like scrolling around in there. You can't hover over stuff. It's really just the opportunity to put annotations into screenshots and click your way through it. In saying that, those tools tend to be on the cheaper end of the spectrum, which means that they're more accessible to those early stage startups. They tend to be a little bit more simple from an editing experience. So if you're looking for something that you can sort of capture and then get out the door really quickly, they're effective in that context. The second one is the application replication tools, and they are probably at the far end of the complexity spectrum, right? Because what they're doing is capturing your entire app. So they're capturing the HTML, the CSS, but they're also capturing the network requests that are happening in the background. And what that allows them to do is basically let you change data that is flowing into these systems and adjust stories or adjust the way that dashboards look in a really flexible way. So the challenge with those is that they tend to be a lot more expensive than even the last category that I'm going to run you through. So if you're looking for something that is really fully featured and you want the ability to adjust data in your app after you've recorded it in a way that is like super flexible, that's a really good way to go if you've got the cash to spend. And then the last category, which I think is sort of the nice in between. This is where HowdyGo sits, and there's a bunch of different competitors out there, but effectively we think it's like the sweet spot of flexibility, price, and sort of complexity, because you get most of the upsides of the demo replication, application replication kind of experience, because you're able to go in there and edit the content in your website after you've recorded it. So you can be like, okay, I'm sending this out to this particular prospect, so I want to make sure that we've got their name in the content, and we want to make sure that their logo's up there, and we want to adjust the list of companies that are in this dashboard. You can go in, you can do that after you've recorded it. You can send it out as a one-off to them, or you could implement a templated brand fetch system where you put in the name as a sort of, the classic like templated values, and then update those things automatically. You can also adjust content in there to match the storyline that you're wanting to achieve in your sort of standard demo flows. But the upside is it's sort of like in between on the price level. So, our lowest tier is $39 a month if you pay for the whole year, which is actually, it's pretty cheap, and it's competitive to the screenshot tools that are out there. I kind of view it as you can go up in up in terms of price, and you will unlock the ability to basically do everything that you could in the lower tiers. It's really about deciding how much cash you've got to spend, and also how much flexibility you really want from a sort of long-term perspective. If you kind of just wanted to dip your toe in, go for one of the screenshot tools, try it out for a little bit, see if there's a bunch of different use cases that you could apply these demos to, and then sort of move up the tiers as you go, rather than diving in on a tens of thousands of dollars spend on the application replication tools straight off the bat.
Yeah, cool. Makes a lot of sense, and it's a really fascinating, fast-growing space. So I appreciate you unpacking it for us. I want to switch gears slightly now to sort of company building. And you wrote this really awesome post on LinkedIn the other day. I read it and I could feel your descriptions intimately because we're sort of going through the same path as well. But it was about bootstrapping startups, and I wanted to first ask you sort of why you decided to bootstrap HowdyGo. What's the reasoning behind that? But also, how has that experience been so far? And what are sort of some of the key learnings that you've had in that experience? You mentioned you're about a year or so in. So I'd love to hear sort of what are those key things that you're taking away from the experience so far?
Yeah. I mean, the first question around why we decided to bootstrap, I guess it was off the back of, our experience at BibLiU. EdTech is an interesting world. It's not like the sexiest place to be when you're trying to build a startup. At one point, we had as effective a growth function for finding investors as we did for finding customers, and that was pretty full on. Bootstrapping is very, very hard, but I think that the upside to it is that you will find a company that is much more stable, consistent, and reliable in terms of generating revenue. Like the reality is that investment can sort of hide or mask problems, and sometimes you can kind of work your way through them and grow your way through them. Other times you can't. We've, as you said, we've been working on this for a year. It's a massive roller coaster. I mean, like, you can go from like the absolute pits of hell one day to the next day, like signing a massive customer and being like, oh my God, I can't believe we're doing this. I think that in terms of lessons that I've learned over the last year, it's not really a lesson I've learned over the last year, I guess. I wish that I could go back like 2-3 years and start building my network in a very broad way, particularly on LinkedIn. I mean, it just so happens that in the interactive product demo space, the best place to be is LinkedIn because all the marketers are there. But your network and the opportunity to kind of use that network is so valuable. And we've had a few opportunities there, but I kind of wish that we'd sort of all been working towards that for a much longer time, because it feels a little bit like we're in catch-up mode. The other thing is that, I mean, what I've found over the last year is that the most important aspect to kind of getting through this period is like having amazing co-founders. And I think that, the fact that we're all mates from a previous company is fortunate, because those really crushing days are only made better by having a chat with one of your other co-founders who is either feeling the exact same thing, in which case you can sort of languish in that conversation, or alternatively, they're willing to kind of they're in a different place and they're ready to like lift you out of that mood and kind of get you back on the horse. So I think those are my two core takeaways over the last year: the value of good co-founders and the value of having a wide network. And we're building that network now because long term we want to keep on growing this business, and I think that having that personal brand is just so valuable when it comes to literally anything. I mean, you have a problem or you have a question, just being able to put it out there and get amazing advice and feedback from a network on LinkedIn is just so valuable.
Yeah, these are great lessons. And I think on the LinkedIn front, You may say that you're catching up, but I think you're doing an awesome job. I've been reading your content and I've been learning a lot from it. So
That's good.
keep pushing it. Actually, one area that I was interested in getting your insight on, and something we've talked about in our last conversation, you also posted on this, is product-led growth. And I'm a big believer in product-led growth. I think it's, there's a lot of value and interesting strategies there. At the same time, I think a lot of content makes it sound a lot easier than it is. And one thing in particular, I think you were talking about, freemium and pricing and executing on that can be a lot more challenging than it seems on the surface. But I'd love to hear your experience with product-led growth, right? What are some of those gotchas that you've found? And what I mean by gotcha is like, everybody talks about it as sort of the silver bullet and you should be doing this or that. But actually, in reality, it's a lot harder to implement. Not that it can't be successful and you can't get a lot of impact from it, but like something that you found that was just a lot more challenging. And that would be helpful for our viewers just to go in with, eyes wide open. What are some of those PLG gotchas that you've experienced?
Yeah, I mean, I think like any startup founder, we kind of went into with the mentality of like, if you make it free, then people will love it. Which is always the mentality, because you are like, I've built something, I've put a lot of time into this. It's pretty good, and I think that if you're getting this for free, you should feel like you're getting a lot of value. But that's not really the way that people interact with products that they're getting for free, right? Like you see the horror stories of customers complaining about not getting access to a feature and they're literally paying you nothing, and it's hard to view them as a customer in that context. And I think that PLG means so much to so many different people, depending on who they are, what the company is that they're working for, and the sort of business environment that they're working within. And you can be a PLG company without having a freemium product, right? Like there's customers that we're working with who sell massive enterprise legal software, and the reality is that like they're not going down a path of pay nothing to get access to our product. But what they are doing is saying our product is so good that you're going to want to keep on coming back, and removing friction from that experience and giving people access to your product is just so valuable in its own right. So I think that, PLG, it's a super effective model, but it's also very contextual. And when we went down that traditional PLG path with the free plan, the challenge that we found was that basically it had two kind of issues with how we wanted to operate. One is that it sucks to be building something for someone who's not paying anything, particularly when you're bootstrapped. Like there's no money coming in the door. Then how are you like finding the motivation to come back every day and work on this product and make it the best that you can? And the other thing is that we actually found that it really impacted our conversations with potential customers, because we were having conversations about how, they should pay for our middle tier, but they're sort of falling back on the fact that, well, I'm not really using those features yet. And that was probably a product of us not really understanding how to structure the tiers for our product. And I think that until you've had a few iterations of working with paying customers and figuring out where they sort of see those value tiers sitting, it's very hard for you to basically establish those without any external feedback system. So charging early and charging up front is super valuable. And I think that, bootstrappers in particular really have to go down that path unless they have a massive network that they can get this stuff out to and sort of build that network effect and that referral process. But if you're starting and you've got like very limited network, I think that the most important thing you can do is get paying customers in the door, because you can trust their feedback a million times more than someone who's paying you nothing. And you can also you can trust that they're on your side in a way, because they're paying you. So you're both trying to make sure that this product is a success. And I think that's a really valuable environment to be working in.
Yeah. And it seems like interactive product demos can actually provide a bridge there, right? Still give people a feel for what the product is and how it works without having to give away the product, right? And sort of lead them into the first paid tier. So that's actually a really interesting bridge there. My last question for you is actually more about Australia. I've been just over the last couple years, actually, I guess it's the last decade or two, we've seen some really big SaaS successes come out of Australia, right? So like, I think the two big ones that everyone refers to are Atlassian and then more recently Canva. So I was going to ask you, what's in the water over there? What's going on? Why are all these awesome companies coming out of Australia? But no, seriously though, like what's your perspective on the startup scene there? Is it humming? Are you seeing a startup scene forming? And from your perspective as a startup founder in Australia, what are the opportunities that you see in building startups in Australia, but also the challenges, right? I'm sure there are certain challenges as well. Obviously, accessing the US market, I can imagine time zones even are pretty challenging. But I'd love to hear your perspective on building a startup in Australia.
Yeah. First off, we're fortunate to have a co-founder based over in London, so he kind of helps out with anything Northern Hemisphere, which is nice. I think that when you look at the startup ecosystem in Australia, it's such an interesting place because you do have this small market, and everyone that you speak to is like, "Oh, I'm planning my US expansion. I'm planning my UK expansion." Which is it. I don't know. It's kind of funny to me because when you talk about expanding into a new country, it's really difficult to pull it off, particularly if you're not on the ground, unless you've gone down the path of having a really, really effective growth engine that is basically borderless. You should ignore it from the start if that's where you want to go. So the ecosystem, I think, is really welcoming. I've only been back in Sydney for a year now, having been based in London for 4.5. And, I've met so many amazing founders who are all looking to do really, really interesting things. And I think that that welcoming environment is so awesome in a startup ecosystem, because I feel like sometimes it tends to lean towards that sort of insincere vibe, particularly when you go deep into startup world. Whereas Australian startups, they tend to be pretty down to earth. They're always looking out for each other. We have some fantastic customers who basically signed up to us because we're Australian, and we'll take that. You kind of have to take it when you're brand new. And I think that there's so much value in that, and it's so nice to be able to like drop into their office and have a chat with them, not about interactive product demos, but talk to them about, how their business is going and understand what they're doing in their sales function, and really just kind of like have a chat. And I think that ecosystem is so nice, and it's so small as well, because you kind of, you're often basically working with the same people or having interactions with the same people. And I guess like the other end of the spectrum is the funding side. And there are a lot of good family offices, VCs out here who are doing fantastic work. It's almost like a running joke that like Canva employees eventually leave and go and start their own business, or they turn into little VCs and try to support other Australian businesses. We also get a lot of funding out of Singapore as well. I think when you look at Australia, it is far away, but it also has access to all of that Southeast Asian market, the sort of time zones that fit more closely with Australia. Hong Kong, you can work in China, you can work in all of these fantastic countries that are maybe a little bit underserviced by the US competitors, which is really nice. And then with my co-founder being in London, we're able to sort of access that UK and North American market as well. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah, and looking at that picture behind you, it doesn't look like a bad place to live at all. So,
yeah, no complaints.
Awesome.
That's Cottesloe in Perth. So
awesome. Well, Tom, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us and share your lessons. And If folks want to learn more about HowdyGo or follow you on your journey as a startup founder, what's the best? Where are the best places for them to follow you guys?
Yeah, definitely follow me on LinkedIn. You'll get to see all these posts that are apparently great. It's /in/T Bruining, Bruining. And if you want to check out HowdyGo, howdygo.com. Really simple. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and have a good rest of your day over there.
Thanks.